Vivian stood quietly in the corner of the living room while her family laughed around the dinner table, as if she were just another piece of furniture no one remembered placing there. She was the middle child in a house where attention always seemed to skip over her like a stone on water. Her older brother, Sam, was the pride of the family, always winning something, always praised. Her older sister, Esther, was treated like royalty, admired for everything she did, even the smallest things. Then there was Vivian, who learned early that silence was safer than asking for recognition. "You're strong, you'll figure things out," her father would often say, brushing her aside without even looking at her. And so, Vivian grew up learning how to survive without expecting anything from anyone. When Vivian turned 16, she hoped just once things would be different for her, but life had other plans. Sam had received a brand new car at that same age, and Esther had been handed keys along with a credit card for emergencies. Vivian, however, was given a handshake and a job application form from a nearby grocery store. "It will build your character," her mother said, smiling as if she had given her a gift. She worked long hours, saving every dollar, watching her siblings enjoy a life she was never offered. At night she would sit alone, wondering what she had done wrong to deserve less. But no answer ever came, only the quiet hum of acceptance settling into her bones. Years passed and Vivian built her life the hard way, one step at a time, without help or praise. She paid her way through school, juggling classes and late-night shifts while her siblings lived freely on their parents' support. When she finally graduated and found a decent job in technology, it felt like a small victory no one noticed. "Good for you," her father said once, barely glancing up from his phone. Vivian smiled politely, hiding the ache behind her eyes, pretending it did not matter anymore. She moved into a small apartment, worn out but proud, knowing everything there belonged to her alone. For the first time she felt a strange kind of freedom, even if it came with loneliness. The real pain began when Sam announced his wedding, calling Vivian with a voice that sounded careful and distant. "We're keeping it small," Sam said, pausing like he was choosing his words too carefully. Vivian felt something shift inside her, a quiet warning she had learned not to ignore. When Sam finally said she wouldn't be invited, blaming it on traditions, Vivian let out a soft laugh that held no humor at all. "So I'm not family enough to be there?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "It's not like that," Sam replied quickly, but neither of them believed it. When the call ended, Vivian sat alone in the dark, realizing she had just been erased from another moment that mattered. It did not stop there, as Esther and later her younger sister Angela followed the same pattern with their own weddings. Each time, Vivian was either excluded completely or invited only to watch from a distance, never truly part of the celebration. "It's just how things worked out," they would say, offering excuses that sounded hollow and rehearsed. Vivian stopped arguing, stopped asking questions, and slowly stopped expecting anything at all. Instead, she focused on building a life that did not depend on their approval or presence. She found comfort in friends who treated her like she mattered, and in quiet moments where no one compared her to anyone else. And deep inside, without saying it out loud, she began to prepare for the day life would give her her own moment to decide. Vivian's life began to shift in quiet but meaningful ways as she focused more on herself and less on the family that had overlooked her for years. She poured her energy into her work, staying late, learning new skills, and slowly climbing her way up in her company. Her efforts did not go unnoticed this time, and within a year she earned a promotion that came with a better salary and more responsibility. "You've earned this," her manager told her, shaking her hand with genuine respect. Vivian smiled, feeling something unfamiliar yet powerful settle inside her, a sense of worth that no one could take away. She moved into a better apartment, decorated it the way she liked, and for the first time, it truly felt like home. It was quiet, peaceful, and free from judgment. Around that time, Vivian met a man named Leo through a mutual friend at a small weekend gathering. He was calm, thoughtful, and had a way of listening that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. "You don't talk much, but I feel like you have a lot to say," he said to her one evening, smiling gently. Vivian laughed softly, surprised by how comfortable she felt around him. They started spending more time together, going on simple dates that meant more to her than any grand gesture ever could. Leo never rushed her, never questioned her past, and never made her feel like she had to prove herself. With him she felt safe, and that feeling slowly began to heal parts of her she had long ignored. As their relationship grew stronger, Vivian found herself opening up about her family for the first time. One night, sitting on her couch, she told Leo everything from the favoritism to the weddings she had been excluded from. He listened quietly, his expression soft but serious, never interrupting her. "You deserved better," he said simply when she finished, his voice steady with sincerity. Vivian looked at him, her eyes slightly wet, not from sadness but from the relief of finally being understood. "I stopped expecting anything from them a long time ago," she admitted. Leo reached for her hand, holding it gently. "That doesn't mean you don't deserve everything," he replied, and for the first time she believed it. 2 years later, Leo proposed to Vivian in the most simple yet meaningful way she could have ever imagined. There were no grand displays, no crowd, just the two of them at her favorite quiet park where they often spent their weekends. "I don't have anything fancy planned," he said, holding a small box in his hand, "but I know I want to spend my life with you." Vivian's heart raced as she looked at him, her mind replaying every moment that had brought her to this point. "Are you sure?" she asked softly, almost afraid the moment might disappear. Leo smiled, nodding without hesitation. "I've never been more sure about anything," he said, and she said yes with tears in her eyes and a smile that finally reached her soul. As they began planning their wedding, Vivian faced a decision she had been quietly preparing for all her life. Sitting at her dining table with a notebook in front of her, she wrote down names of people who had truly been there for her. Friends, colleagues, and those who had shown her kindness without conditions filled the list. Leo watched her carefully, then asked gently, "What about your family?" Vivian paused, staring at the empty space where their names could have been. "I don't think they should be there," she said slowly, testing the weight of her own words. Leo nodded without hesitation. "Then they won't be," he replied, and in that moment Vivian realized this was her chance to choose herself for the very first time. Vivian sat quietly after making her decision, letting the weight of it settle deep inside her chest. For years she had imagined what her wedding day would look like, but never like this. There was no anger in her heart, just a calm clarity she had never felt before. "Are you sure you won't regret it?" Leo asked gently, watching her carefully. Vivian shook her head slowly, her voice steady. "I've spent my whole life trying to earn a place in their lives," she said. "This time I want to build something where I already belong." Leo smiled, reaching for her hand and squeezed it softly. "Then we build it your way," he said, and she felt stronger than ever. The planning moved quickly, just the way Vivian wanted it, simple, peaceful, and free from unnecessary stress. They chose a small event space with warm lighting and a quiet atmosphere that felt intimate and welcoming. "It's perfect," Leo said as they walked through the hall, imagining their day unfolding there. Vivian nodded, picturing laughter, music, and people who truly cared filling the room. There were no complicated arrangements, no pressure to impress anyone, just a focus on meaning. She selected a simple dress, elegant without trying too hard, just like her journey had been. For the first time she was not planning something to please others, she was creating something for herself. When Vivian finally decided to tell her family, she chose a quiet evening during one of the rare dinners she attended. They were all there, sitting around the same table that had once made her feel invisible. "Leo and I are getting married," she announced calmly, placing her hands together on the table. There was a brief pause before the reactions began, surprise, excitement, and curiosity filling the room. "That's wonderful news," her mother said, smiling brightly. Sam leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow. "So when's the big day?" he asked casually, as if nothing had ever happened between them. Vivian took a deep breath, knowing what she was about to say would change everything. "It's in 2 months," Vivian replied, her voice steady but firm. Esther clapped her hands softly, already excited. "Oh, that's soon, we have so much to plan," she said, her tone full of enthusiasm. Angela leaned forward, smiling. "Where is it going to be?" "I need to start thinking about outfits," she added playfully. Vivian looked at each of them one by one, her expression calm but unreadable. "It's going to be a small ceremony," she continued, choosing her words carefully. Her father nodded approvingly. "That's good, no need for unnecessary expenses," he said, clearly pleased. Vivian's heart beat faster as she prepared to finish what she started. "When I say small, I mean very small," Vivian added, her voice lowering slightly. The room grew quiet and everyone seemed to sense the shift in her tone. "It will be just Leo's family and a few close friends," she said, finally letting the words land. Her mother's smile faded instantly, confusion replacing it. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Vivian met her gaze without hesitation. "I mean you're not invited," she said calmly, her words clear and undeniable. The silence that followed felt heavy, like the air itself had stopped moving. In that moment, years of unspoken hurt stood between them. Sam was the first to react, pushing his chair back slightly as his expression hardened. "Are you serious right now?" he asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Esther shook her head, her face filled with shock. "Vivian, this isn't funny," she said, her tone sharp. Angela looked from one person to another, clearly unsure of how to respond. Their father placed his hands on the table, his voice firm. "You can't just exclude your own family like this," he said. Vivian remained calm, her eyes steady. "I'm not excluding anyone," she replied quietly. "I'm just giving the same treatment I received." Her mother's eyes filled with tears as she leaned forward, her voice breaking. "We never meant to hurt you," she said, trying to reach for Vivian's hand. Vivian gently pulled her hand back, not out of anger but out of distance she had built over time. "But you did," she replied softly, her voice carrying years of quiet pain. Sam let out a frustrated sigh. "That was different," he insisted, waving his hand dismissively. Vivian shook her head slowly. "No, it wasn't," she said. "It was exactly the same, just happening to you now." Her words hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Esther crossed her arms, her tone turning defensive. "We had our reasons," she said, her voice rising slightly. Vivian nodded, acknowledging her words without agreeing. "And now I have mine," she replied calmly. Angela looked down at the table, her expression softening as if she was beginning to understand. "Vivian, we didn't think it affected you this much," she said quietly. Vivian let out a small breath, almost a tired smile. "That's the problem," she said. "You never thought about how it affected me at all." The truth in her voice left no room for argument. Their father leaned back, his face tightening as he tried to regain control of the situation. "You're being emotional," he said, his tone firm but dismissive. Vivian's eyes met his, calm and unshaken. "No," she replied quietly, "I'm being clear." Sam scoffed, shaking his head. "You're going to regret this," he said, pointing a finger slightly. Vivian did not react, her voice steady as ever. "I've spent years regretting things I didn't do," she said. "This is not going to be one of them." Her confidence made it clear that this decision was final. Vivian stood up slowly, pushing her chair back as the tension in the room remained thick. "I didn't come here to argue," she said, her tone calm but firm. "I just came to inform you." Her mother wiped her tears, her voice soft but pleading. "Please reconsider," she whispered. Vivian paused for a moment, looking at all of them, not with anger but with quiet acceptance. "I already have," she said gently. Without another word, she picked up her bag and walked toward the door, leaving behind a silence that spoke louder than any argument ever could. Vivian walked out of the house that night with a calmness she had never felt before, even though her heart was beating fast. The cool air hit her face as she stepped outside, and for a moment she paused to take a deep breath. Leo was waiting in the car, watching her carefully as she approached. "How did it go?" he asked softly the moment she got in. Vivian looked ahead, her eyes steady, then let out a small breath. "Exactly how I expected," she replied. Leo nodded, not asking further because he already understood. He reached for her hand and she squeezed it gently, grounding herself in the moment. As they drove away, Vivian felt like she had finally closed a chapter she had been stuck in for years. The days that followed were not quiet as Vivian had hoped, but filled with constant calls and messages from her family. Her phone buzzed endlessly, lighting up with names she had learned to ignore over time. Her mother sent long emotional messages filled with apologies and pleas. Sam's texts were shorter, more direct, filled with frustration and disbelief. Esther tried to sound reasonable, asking Vivian to think about the bigger picture. Angela's messages were softer, unsure, as if she was caught between understanding and loyalty. Vivian read some of them, ignored most, and responded to none. She had spent too many years explaining herself, and now silence felt like the strongest answer. One evening, while Vivian was cooking dinner, her phone rang again, and this time she picked it up. It was Angela, her voice hesitant on the other end. "Vivian, can we talk?" she asked quietly. Vivian leaned against the kitchen counter, considering for a moment. "We are talking," she replied calmly. Angela sighed softly. "I just want to understand," she said. Vivian closed her eyes briefly, gathering her thoughts. "There's nothing complicated to understand," she said. "You all made your choices and now I'm making mine." Angela was silent for a moment, then whispered, "I'm sorry," before the call ended. Vivian stood there for a few seconds, feeling something shift, but not enough to change her decision. As the wedding day grew closer, Vivian focused entirely on what mattered most, building a beautiful, peaceful celebration with Leo. They finalized the guest list, confirmed the decorations, and worked together on every small detail. "I want this to feel like us," Vivian said one evening as they reviewed the plans. Leo smiled. "It already does," he replied. There were no arguments, no stress, no pressure from outside voices trying to take control. Instead, there was laughter, shared ideas, and quiet moments of excitement. Vivian realized that this was what planning a wedding was supposed to feel like, not a battle but a celebration of love and partnership. 2 weeks before the wedding, something unexpected happened that tested Vivian's resolve once again. She came home from work to find her parents standing outside her apartment door. Her mother looked tired, her eyes red as if she had been crying for hours. Her father stood beside her, his expression serious but controlled. "We need to talk," he said as soon as Vivian approached. Vivian stopped a few steps away, her face calm but distant. "There's nothing left to talk about," she replied quietly. Her mother stepped forward slightly. "Please, just a few minutes," she begged. After a brief pause, Vivian unlocked the door and let them in. They sat in her living room, looking around as if noticing for the first time the life Vivian had built without them. Her mother spoke first, her voice soft and trembling. "We've been thinking a lot about everything," she said. Vivian stood by the window, arms crossed gently, listening but not interrupting. "We realize we made mistakes," her mother continued. Her father nodded, adding, "We should have handled things differently." Vivian turned slowly, her eyes meeting theirs. "You had many chances," she said calmly. "Not just once but over and over again." The weight of her words settled heavily between them. Her mother's voice broke as she spoke again. "We didn't realize how much it hurt you," she admitted. Vivian's expression softened slightly, but her resolve remained firm. "That's because you never looked," she replied quietly. Her father shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. "We're here now," he said. "We want to fix this." Vivian shook her head gently. "Some things don't get fixed just because you show up late," she said. There was no anger in her voice, only truth. Her parents sat in silence, finally beginning to understand what years of neglect had created. Her father tried one last time, leaning forward slightly. "We want to be at your wedding," he said firmly. Vivian looked at him, her expression calm but unchanging. "You weren't there when it mattered," she replied. "This is the result of that." Her mother wiped her tears, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're your family," she said. Vivian paused for a moment, then spoke softly. "Family shows up, supports, and includes," she said. "That's not what I experienced." Her words were not meant to hurt, but they carried a truth that could not be ignored. The room fell into silence, filled with everything that had been left unsaid for years. Her father's expression hardened slightly, frustration mixing with regret. "If you go through with this, don't expect things to be the same," he said. Vivian nodded slowly, accepting his words without fear. "They haven't been the same for a long time," she replied. Her mother began to cry again, but this time Vivian did not move to comfort her. She had spent too many years trying to hold together something that had already been broken. Now she was choosing herself, and that came with letting go. When they finally left, Vivian stood alone in her apartment, the silence wrapping around her like a quiet confirmation. She walked slowly to the couch and sat down, letting everything settle inside her. Leo returned shortly after, noticing the look on her face immediately. "They came, didn't they?" he asked gently. Vivian nodded, leaning back slightly. "They did," she replied. Leo sat beside her, pulling her into a soft embrace. "Are you okay?" he asked. Vivian closed her eyes for a moment, then whispered, "For the first time in a long time, I really am." The morning of the wedding arrived quietly, without chaos or pressure, just a calm excitement that filled the air. Vivian woke up early, sitting by the window as soft sunlight poured into the room. She held her dress gently, taking in the moment she had worked so hard to reach. "Today is mine," she whispered to herself, a small smile forming on her lips. There were no anxious calls, no overwhelming expectations, just peace. Leo walked in shortly after, smiling when he saw her. "Ready?" he asked softly. Vivian nodded, her eyes shining with quiet confidence. At the venue, everything came together exactly as they had planned, simple, warm, and full of meaning. The room was filled with soft music and the gentle hum of voices from people who truly cared. Vivian walked in slowly, taking in every detail she had chosen herself. "This feels right," she said quietly to Leo. He smiled, squeezing her hand. "Because it is," he replied. There were no forced smiles or uncomfortable conversations, only genuine happiness and support. For once, Vivian did not feel like she had to shrink herself to fit in. The ceremony began, and as Vivian walked down the aisle, all eyes were on her, not with judgment but with admiration. She moved steadily, her heart full, her past no longer weighing her down. Leo stood at the front, his expression filled with love and certainty. When their eyes met, everything else faded away. "You look beautiful," he whispered as she reached him. Vivian smiled, her voice soft but steady. "So do you," she replied. In that moment she knew she had made the right choice. Their vows were simple but powerful, spoken from the heart without unnecessary words. "I promise to always choose you," Leo said, his voice clear and sincere. Vivian felt tears fill her eyes as she listened. When it was her turn, she took a deep breath. "I promise to build a life where we both feel valued, every single day," she said. Her words carried years of experience, pain, and growth. The room fell silent, everyone feeling the depth behind them. This was not just a wedding, it was a new beginning. After the ceremony, the celebration began, filled with laughter, music, and moments that felt real and unforced. Vivian moved through the room, greeting friends who had stood by her through everything. "I'm so proud of you," one of her close friends said, pulling her into a hug. Vivian smiled, her heart full. Leo joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "You did this," he said softly. Vivian shook her head gently. "We did this," she corrected, and they both laughed. The joy in the room was undeniable. At one point, Leo's father approached Vivian, his expression kind and sincere. "Welcome to the family," he said warmly. Vivian paused for a moment, the words hitting her in a way she did not expect. "Thank you," she replied softly. There was no condition in his voice, no hesitation, just acceptance. It was everything she had longed for without realizing it. Leo's mother joined them, smiling brightly. "You're one of us now," she added, and Vivian felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Later that evening, as the music played and people danced around them, Vivian stepped outside for a moment of quiet. She looked up at the sky, letting the cool air brush against her skin. For a second, memories of the past flickered through her mind, the exclusion, the silence, the years of feeling invisible. But this time those memories did not hurt the same way. They felt distant, like a story that no longer belonged to her. "You okay?" Leo's voice came from behind her. Vivian turned, smiling softly. "I'm more than okay," she said. Back inside, the celebration continued, full of life and genuine happiness. Vivian danced freely, laughing in a way she had not done in years. There were no expectations to meet, no roles to play, just her being herself. Leo spun her around playfully and she laughed, holding on to him tightly. "This is everything I wanted," she said breathlessly. Leo smiled, his eyes warm. "And it's just the beginning," he replied. For the first time, Vivian believed in what came next. As the night slowly came to an end, Vivian sat beside Leo, watching their guests say their goodbyes. The room was quieter now, filled with the soft echoes of a day well spent. She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling a deep sense of peace settle within her. "No regrets?" Leo asked gently. Vivian shook her head without hesitation. "None," she replied. She had chosen herself, her happiness, and her future, and that choice had given her everything she needed. The past no longer defined her. That night, as Vivian and Leo left the venue together, hand in hand, she took one last look back, not with sadness but with gratitude. She had turned years of being overlooked into a moment of strength and clarity. Her story had not ended in pain but in purpose. As they walked forward into their new life, Vivian felt something she had never truly known before, a sense of belonging that came from within, not from others. "Ready for forever?" Leo asked with a smile. Vivian squeezed his hand gently. "I've been ready," she replied, and together, they stepped into a future she had finally chosen for herself.